Right, so I'm already cheating on this like I feel I do every single week, but I'm actually gonna have to take you all back to an era, a time, the zeitgeist of 2006, 2007, 2008, the beginning of what was then the next generation of consoles, the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. And I'm gonna talk about how the Ubisoft Tom Clancy games from that era, we took them all for granted. In particular, Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter and Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2, two of the best third-person shooters of the generation that everyone just kind of forgot about and was like, well, nah, it's not like the quality of Gears or whatever. And that is really annoying because I feel as though that period of the Tom Clancy license was when the franchise was at its peak. You know, that was the era, you know, people may have not liked Double Agent as much as, you know, Chaos Theory. Obviously, Chaos Theory is like the best stealth game of all time, so that's understandable. But that entire era, you had Ghost Recon, you had Rainbow Six Vegas 1 and 2, and it was at the point where the series was divesting sort of from more the tactical side and leaning more into the slightly linear, more action-oriented roots of what we would come to see later on with the, you know, kind of what many would consider to be, you know, the decline of the franchise and how it's not, you know, it's lost its identity with stuff like Ghost Recon Future Soldier and Ghost Recon Wildlands and Breakpoint or whatever. So it was really the last hurrah of like mainstream tactical like shooting gameplay.
Do you remember as well? Like it was one of the biggest next gen features at the time was that game had picture in picture. That was the breakthrough thing. I'm just saying that was a big thing.
I remember that at the time that it was in-game advertising in the online multiplayer. I remember seeing in-game adverts for like films. I remember like just playing around and Jason Statham was advertising the Transporter 2 just randomly on the screen. I was like, wow, this is the future of gaming. And we're going to get adverts beamed into our online multiplayer spaces. And we never got further from that. It never continued the growth of the online multiplayer advertisement space. And for part of me, it's like, I'm glad about that. But on the other hand, I was like, oh, it was kind of funny seeing just random pieces of Jason Statham torn about in war-torn Mexico. So I don't know. Maybe we should bring it back.
Well, my answer is absolutely wrong because it's one of the highest grossing series on the Nintendo DS, and that is the Professor Layton series. Outstanding games. Turns out everybody's played them, apparently, according to Amy and Ewan's dad.
Dad did enjoy Professor Layton.
But I remember growing up, none of my friends played it. Nobody I knew played it. I thought it was just me who found this little gem until I found out that in Japan it's like the biggest thing ever. And there's like a million movies and stuff. But like the games got me through exams and stuff. It made me smarter without realizing because I was like, my mum
Professor Layton made me big brain.
Like my mum or whatever would buy me it and I'd be like, wait, I've just found a cheeky little game. But underneath, it was making me prepared to get smarter.
Are you sure you didn't play brain training? Because everyone's parents got them brain training, being like, this will get you through your GCSE maths, this will. And did it? No, it didn't. It shamed me for neglecting it.
The Sudoku on there was no joke, though.
But yeah, Professor Layton games, and there was 7, 8 of them. I got bored after the first 5, because then it got a bit naff. But the first trilogy... Like there's one where they go in. I don't want to spoil it, but they go into the future. But it turns out they're underground while solving puzzles. Oh, it hasn't been 15 years, Amy. It's been 10.
James Dowse.
It's been 10. That's huge.
You need to do Professor Layton Cinematic Universe explained for WhatCulture Gaming, and we'll put a big arrow on his hat, and then that'll be like
underneath.
What's underneath the hat? Yeah. Exactly.
That was in the next game. That was the one
the next channel. Is WhatCulture Layton, I've just announced.
It's about
Layton
time,
culture.
Yeah.
I've got lots of questions, man. First of all, which Mickey Mouse establishment gave Professor Layton this degree so he could get this title? What's he playing at, James? Is he a real professional or is he just a grifter coming into the gaming space to dominate you?
Is Dr. Kawashima a doctor? Because he just writes
Dr. Mario Doctor. I mean, it's all gone to sideways, really. Yeah, with his giant.
Yeah. No, sure. No, he is a professor. Of course he has. He's got a hat.
I actually have a bit of a different vibe. So the game that I'm going to talk about is less sort of something. It sounds silly, less something you play for like fun, it's not particularly relaxing, but it's a really quite like impactful and meaningful game when you actually look like further into it. So my game is This War of Mine, and I'm glad people know it, because I had no gauge as to whether people had played it or whether it had gone really under the radar for everyone, because I found it completely by accident, just on Steam one day, flicking through what was on sale on a discount, and I was like, oh, that looks quite interesting. I like a bit of survival, you know, you're crafting, all that kind of thing. I can get into that. But then as I actually sort of put more hours into it, it has an incredible sort of moral drive to it, and the questions and the situations it puts you in sort of make you question yourself, and overall I think it's a very, very smart game. As well as that, I adore the art style of it. I think it's a really visually impressive game with the whole sort of undersaturated sad look to it, but then also the fact that they took the inspiration for all the scenes and the settings from places that the developers had sort of been to and lived in, and their family members who had lived in places that have gone through sort of times of war and very dark times like that. But honestly, I couldn't rave about it enough, because every single element that goes into the gameplay has been thought through and works perfectly for exactly what they were going for. But I've never heard anyone else talk about it.
Oh, dude, well, welcome to WhatCulture. There's all sorts of things. That game, man, like the whole being inspired by the Siege of Sarajevo, like I think that's the thing. And just obviously it's like pulls from a whole bunch of like real world conflict and stuff. But I always thought of it that you could kind of tag that onto the end of any like Call of Duty campaign or any sort of overblown, like you're not thinking of collateral damage, you're not thinking of the people that need to live in those buildings after you've torn a hole through the whole place.
It's an indictment of how the industry has failed like depictions of conflict, like in terms of like, you know, we only ever experience war through the lens of video games, the eyes of a soldier, and never the people who are, you know, kind of in these very different destinations. So yeah, This War of Mine,
that exact thing is something I found so interesting about it, is that it puts you in the shoes of a completely regular person. The players that you default as when you first start playing it, before you've unlocked some more, is something like an old professor and a lawyer who are just kind of trying to survive. They're using their skills they had before, but none of them are equipped for combat. None of them know how to live in sort of the world as it's become now, and that's so reflected in how you have to go about playing the game.
They also they will very much get depressed, and you can't one guy will take multiple characters will take their own lives if you've made them kill other people, like if they kill to survive and things like that. Like, it doesn't pull any punches, and it's brutally effective. This War of Mine is a hell of a shout. That should probably be our thumbnail for this thing, an actual genuinely overlooked thing that everybody should check out.
Fantastic game. I'd recommend it to anyone.
Totally.
In a hard pivot, I want to ask you all a question. Off the top of your head, what's your favourite crisps? Scott Tilford, favourite crisps?
Probably Monster Munch, mate. That's what my gut says.
James Dowse?
Quavers.
Amy?
Barbecue Pringles.
Ewan?
Oh, it's got to be the original Pringles. I devour those tubes. They're gone.
A lot of love for Pringles there. I personally would never say Doritos as an answer to this question. Doritos for me, very low down the scale, which is why it's so surprising. Why it's so surprising that they managed to make an excellent video game. Doritos, bad at crisps, good at video games. About 10 years ago, they released Doritos Crash Course for the Xbox Live Arcade, which was this 2.5D obstacle course runner where you had to essentially take part in the game show. It was your Xbox avatar against the clock. You had to run and jump and vault and avoid these falling pillars that were trying to push you around this soft play area. And it was really, 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 really good. It beat Fall Guys at its own game 10 years before the fact. It was awesome. You could play it in you could play it in multiplayer with someone locally and try to beat their time, which me and my brother did over and over again. I put hours upon hours trying to get the best time across all of these different courses. And it was great. Like, you look at it, Doritos Crash Course, you watch footage of it, and you have no idea that this was actually a really tight, really satisfying platformer. It was so mint. I can see James Dowse nodding his head, and I feel like he might be one of the only other people who enjoyed this as much as I did.
It was unbelievable, that game. And it was like Total Wipeout, the game, before there was an official Total Wipeout game.
Big Chip has gotten to both of you, like, absolutely.
It was so good.
I want it clarified that, I've not been bought out by Big Chip. Big Chip does not own me or sponsor this video in any way.
No, no.
Well, I mean, you did start it by saying how much you disliked Doritos.
You can do a full survey.
That just makes it more authentic.
I've got to stand in for the Dorito slander, the flaming hot ones, whatever the red.
Chili
only
Heat Wave.
acceptable ones.
Chili Heat Wave.
Chili Heat Wave.
Best
Stellar.
flavour.
We can mess with Chili Heat Wave.
Yeah, if they want to sponsor
Chili Heat
us,
Wave
let us know.
used to be a personal favorite of mine until one upsetting night I ate like 4 bags in a row, 4 big bags, just handfuls upon handfuls in it. And I'm going to spare you the gory details, but it didn't end well for me that night. Things went weird. My body was doing stuff my body shouldn't have been doing, and everything.
But you were doing stuff you weren't supposed to be doing.
Orange.
That's what led to.
You never played Doritos Crash Course ever again.
That's the thing. You play 100 hours of Doritos Crash Course, you get a craving. Advertising works that way. But apart from that, good game. If you've got an Xbox Live Arcade, and should it still exist, play it and try to beat my time.
What can I say other than I've been playing a hell of a lot of Homefront: The Revolution. Now that game came out in 2017, and for the most part was roundly despised because it was very much the Far Cry formula, just done in a city. It was just everything that we've been doing over and over and over again across Far Cry 3, Far Cry 4, Far Cry Primal, and it was just another one of them. But it's weird going back to it now, and I will say that I'm completely motivated by the fact that everybody, online is doing the rounds that it's been discovered that there's a full copy of Time Splitters 2 inside Homefront: The Revolution. You need to find an arcade cabinet in that game. And you could already play the first couple of levels as like an Easter egg. But one of the developers, I think he's called Matt Phillips, got on Twitter and just said, hey, by the way, lads, the whole game's in there and there's a code to unlock it. But he couldn't remember what it was. And then some guy from Microsoft went, it's this. And so now there's this really cool little gold rush of people going like, I've actually got a HD copy of Time Splitters 2 in a terrible game from Homefront: The Revolution, but technically it's brilliant because
this is like the inception of video game campaigns. You got to heist the single player campaign to play the good game.
Do you know what's really horrible as well is you've got to get through 6 hours of Homefront: The Revolution
exactly
before you get to the point where the arcade machine is. But I'll do it, Ewan, because it's got Time Splitters.
You're
2.
Cillian Murphy in Inception, and you're going to meet Time Splitters 2, who's your dad who you're estranged from.
The thing is, I could hang this whole thing on saying that it is obviously the most overlooked game because of this Time Splitters thing, because that in itself is one of the most overlooked Easter eggs, references, whatever. But also, I will say that playing Homefront: The Revolution now, it's not that bad. Like, it's all right. And I was saying to Mr. JB, Josh Brown, has there ever been a Far Cry set entirely in a city? Because the idea of like open world, using verticality and coming in, sniping dudes from afar, and like, taking advantage of a full open world city space to approach targets and, like take people out and do all sorts of open world mission type stuff, Far Cry style in a city, that feels weirdly quite fresh in the exact time period we're in right now, where Far Cry hasn't been as much of a thing for a little while, and Far Cry 5 didn't land as much, etc. And so for me, I've been quite enjoying Homefront: The Revolution. I know it's a 4 out of 10 game, but I'm liking it, and I know that I'm at the end of that tunnel is Time Splitters 2. So what more do you want? I ask you.